Okay, welcome to the explainer. You've definitely seen it in courtroom dramas, right? The lawyer jumps up and yells, "Objection, hearsay." But what does that actually mean? Well, today we're going to unlock the fascinating and sometimes kind of strange rules about what a witness is and isn't allowed to say in court. So let's just jump right in with a scenario. Imagine a witness is on the stand and they say, "Well, my neighbor told me he saw the defendant." Is that actually allowed? Can someone's testimony be based on what they heard someone else say, not what they saw with their own two eyes? That's really the core question we're tackling today. And in most cases, the answer is a big, firm no. And it's all because of this core legal principle called the hearsay rule. Honestly, you can just think of it as the courtroom's main locked door. It's there for a really good reason, to stop gossip and secondhand stories from being treated as cold, hard fact. See, the court wants evidence it can test right then and there through cross-examination. But what happens when some really vital information is stuck behind that locked door? Well, that's where the exceptions, or as we're calling them, the keys, come in. So here's our game plan. We'll look at the main rule, then we'll explore 3 specific keys that can unlock that door, and finally, we'll talk about why this whole system is just so darn important. Okay, let's dive in and grab our first key. Now this one, it isn't about what people say, but what's written down. We're talking about the official paper trail. You see, the whole legal system kind of operates on this idea that some documents are just, well, they're inherently reliable. They're created as part of someone's official job without any reason to lie. I mean, think about it. The person filling out a birth certificate isn't trying to frame somebody, right? And it's that built-in trustworthiness that makes them a perfect exception to the hearsay rule, even if the person who wrote it isn't in court. And really, this just makes perfect sense, doesn't it? I mean, could you imagine how absurd it would be to have to track down the government clerk who signed your birth certificate 30 years ago just to prove when your birthday is? No way. So the law allows certified public records, things like birth, death, and marriage certificates, to be accepted as direct proof of the facts they contain. But hold on, there's a really critical safeguard here. Let's say you have a conviction certificate. It might prove that a John Smith committed a crime, but it doesn't automatically prove that the John Smith sitting in the courtroom is the exact same person. The prosecution still has to bring in separate evidence to connect those dots. So the key unlocks the fact of the conviction, but it doesn't unlock the identity. That's a super important distinction. Okay, time for our second key. We're moving on from paper now, and we're turning our attention to something a little bit trickier. A witness's own words, from before the trial even started. Now, this is where things get a little counterintuitive, so stick with me. Normally, if a lawyer brings up something a witness said before the trial, it's usually just to show they're changing their story, right? It's a way to attack their credibility. But what if those earlier words could be used as actual proof of what happened? Well, in some cases, they absolutely can. And this is where the law gets really clever. I want you to imagine you're a juror for a second. The lawyer says to you, "Okay, you can consider this previous statement to decide if the witness is lying now, but you can't use it to decide what actually happened back then." Super confusing, right? Well, the law in Queensland just cuts right through all that confusion. It says, hey, that prior inconsistent statement, you can use it as actual evidence. It's a really pragmatic solution that just gets rid of a huge headache for juries. The law also recognizes that, a formal courtroom can be a really intimidating place. And that's especially true for vulnerable witnesses, like children. So to protect them, special exceptions have been carved out for things they've said outside of court. But as you're about to see, different places handle this in very different ways. And here you can see 2 totally different philosophies at play. On the one hand, in Queensland, the approach is all about the format. They allow things like pre-recorded video evidence. On the other hand, the Northern Territory focuses more on the substance. A judge can admit a child's statement if they think it has real value. And this is an absolutely crucial protection. A person cannot be convicted based only on that statement. There has to be more. All right, on to our final key. And this one deals with a classic scenario, something you've definitely seen in the movies. What happens when a crucial witness is just gone? They're unable to appear in court. Is all their evidence lost forever? Well, thankfully, no. Their evidence isn't necessarily lost. This exception is kind of like a voice from afar. It allows testimony that was given under oath at an earlier stage, something like a deposition, to be read into the record if that witness is genuinely unavailable for the trial itself. But, and this is a big but, this key comes with very, very strict conditions. This is not an exception you can use just for convenience. The witness has to be unavailable for a serious, verifiable reason. We're talking about situations where they've passed away, are dangerously ill, have left the country, or in some pretty sinister cases, are being actively kept from being able to testify. Now, this right here is the ultimate safeguard. It is the most important condition of them all, a total non-negotiable. For that prior testimony to be allowed in court, the other side must have had a full and fair chance to cross-examine that witness when the statement was first made. This is what ensures that the evidence, even though it's not live, has already been tested and challenged. It's all about preserving the fairness of the trial. So, there you have it. We've looked at 3 different keys that can open the door of the hearsay rule: the paper trail, a witness's own words, and testimony from an absent witness. But it kind of makes you wonder, right? Why have this whole complicated system of locks and keys in the first place? Well, it all comes down to a really high-stakes balancing act. On one side of the scale, you have the terrifying risk of a wrongful conviction based on unreliable he said, she said gossip. But on the other side, you've got the risk of a guilty person walking free because crucial, trustworthy evidence was unfairly kept out. This entire system is designed to walk that razor-thin line right between those two outcomes. What all these exceptions really do is recognize a simple reality. Sometimes, the most reliable evidence doesn't actually come from a live person sitting in the witness box. Sometimes, it's locked away in a certified government file, or it's preserved in a child's videotaped interview, or it's found in the sworn testimony of someone who just can't be there anymore. And really, that's the main thing you should take away from all this. These keys aren't secret loopholes for lawyers to exploit. No, they are carefully crafted, highly conditional tools. Their whole purpose is to make sure the court can assemble the most accurate picture of the truth possible, using every single reliable piece of the puzzle it can find, while still filtering out all the unreliable noise. And that leaves us with one last, pretty important question to think about. We live in a world where evidence could be a deleted text message, a screenshot of a social media post, or even an AI-generated voice note. So how are these rules going to have to evolve? As our very definition of what a statement even is starts to change, the real challenge will be adapting these old principles to keep striking that delicate balance between finding the truth and guaranteeing a fair trial.